We continue today our study of the pastoral epistles, 1st and 2nd Timothy. And these epistles, as we have said before, were written by Paul, and we're going to say it was Paul, even though scholars debated back and forth. For our purposes of preaching, we're going to call the author Paul, written to a young pastor to talk to that young pastor about various deeds of the church and various spiritual disciplines that need to be practiced. We talked about prayer, and today we talk about another spiritual discipline. Now, this spiritual discipline that I want to talk about today is not particularly a classical spiritual discipline. You're not going to see it listed in the list of spiritual disciplines. But it's a spiritual discipline that I think is very important. It's a spiritual discipline that's talked about in this practice. It's a spiritual discipline that I think is kind of a catch-all, and it's a spiritual discipline that we cannot get along without because it drives all the other kinds of spiritual disciplines, spiritual practices. And that spiritual practice, spiritual discipline that I want to talk about today is called engagement. Engagement. Well, what do I mean by engagement? I use that word in both a physical and a spiritual sense. When we're engaged in something, we connect with it. We connect with it in a way that brings about motion and about transformation. We engage the clutch of a car, or we shift the lever on an automatic transmission, which engages the transmission to drive the car. We engage in a factory by turning on the machinery, and the machine engages and works. We engage in political action. We engage in debate and conversation. We engage in wars and rumors of wars. The dictionary defines engagement, or to engage, in a whole host of ways. There's 6 or 7 definitions. But what we're talking about today is involvement. But more than that, we are talking about interlocked involvement. Involvement that makes all the parts move together. Think of it, as we've said, as a set of gears, and like a drive wheel. The drive wheel drives the other wheels, and Jesus is the rod or the shaft that goes into the drive wheel and makes it all revolve. So, in this text today from 1 Timothy, what does the Apostle Paul call us to engage in or to disengage from? Because that's part of the text also. First, Paul calls us to engage in godliness, combined with contentment. Contentment about what we have. Paul reminds Timothy that we have entered into life with nothing. See, in this passage, we have some of the famous passages of the Bible. You came into the world with nothing, you leave the world with nothing. That's from this passage in 1 Timothy. That we enter into the world with nothing, and we will exit life with nothing. The rich, says Paul, are trapped by their riches, and their engagement in riches have caused some to wander away from the faith, says Paul. And Paul here is talking about the over-engagement with possessions, wealth, money, that should be put under the kingship of God. Paul is asking that we disengage from our focus of accumulation, which was a problem in Paul's time as it is a problem in our time. Disengage from the accumulation of wealth. For Paul knows that he who dies with the most toys still dies. Now, speaking against wealth. Paul probably came from a wealthy family. The early Christians were probably, many of them, very wealthy merchants and leaders. Paul is not talking against wealth. Paul is talking about the proper attitude towards wealth. The proper attitude is summed up in this story that we read from the gospel. The story of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man in life, in spite of the fact that he had more than enough, ignored the needs of someone who was right outside his gate. Someone he saw every day. Someone who he could have touched in some way. The dogs had more pity on Lazarus. You know, we may go hog at this passage about the dogs coming over and licking the wounds, but you need to know that in ancient times, it was a very expensive medical procedure to have dogs lick your wounds. There were dogs specially trained to do that, and it cost a lot of money. Dogs have a natural antibiotic in their tongue. And so it was something that people sought after as a medical treatment. These dogs, as a natural instinct, came and ministered to this man, Lazarus. What the proper attitude towards wealth is to understand that we have great wealth, and we all have great wealth compared to many of the countries in the world. And we have this great wealth because of the grace of God. And if God has graced us, then we need to be graceful and be willing to share what God has graced us with. So in response to grace, we are generous. And when we are generous, God pulls upon us spiritual blessings. I'm not talking about a health and wealth gospel. If you give me $100, God's not going to give you $200. But if you'd like to give me $100, that's okay. But if we give money the proper place in our lives, if we are disengaged from money as an idol, then we are fully engaged with what it means to be part of God's kingdom and give our wealth its proper place. Now, Paul also calls Timothy and all who read this letter to engage in a life that is marked by discernible action. We are to engage as a daily practice in these qualities. We are not only to engage in them, we are to pursue them. And the qualities that we engage in are righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, gentleness. Qualities that can be seen, qualities that are opposite of many of the qualities the world promotes as great qualities. Qualities that the world would have us engage in. The call is to engage in a God-centered life. In a God-centered life. And to do this, we engage in the reality that the Caesars of this world are not really in charge. That Jesus is the King of the world, and it is his kingdom that will ultimately triumph. And when Paul wrote these words, those were sedacious words. To say that anyone but Caesar was king was to say something treasonous against the Roman Empire. But Paul believed that his kingship, that his citizenship was in a different place. And the final thing that Paul calls us to do is probably the most important thing in this passage. And that is to engage in a life that is really life. A life that is really life. He puts it in this way: thus storing up for themselves the treasures of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of the life that is really life. Like I said, that's probably the most important thing that Paul said in this passage. Sadly, we all know people who have wasted their lives. Sadly, we all know people who have followed after false things, engaging in things that have no value. Sadly, all of us know people who have left life slip through their fingers. We've all been given just this one physical life. How many years that life will last, none of us know. We are fragile. We are prone to accident and disease. Life can end for any of us in a moment, or it can change in a moment. That's not news. We know that. It runs through our lives in the background. But we forget it sometimes. We forget it. We forget how precious our lives are, and how precious the lives of those around us are, and how short it is. Paul calls us to engage life, to live life in its fullest, to engage life that's really life, not to waste our lives. Not to waste our lives. We get one chance, and Paul calls us to remember that. So what is our response to this call to spiritual discipline? The response is to engage in a life with God. We read a portion of Psalm 91, but the whole psalm speaks of the engagement with God, and I want to read it for you again, but I want to read it in the Common English Bible, a modern translation that perhaps gives us a better picture of what it means. The translators say this: living in the Most High shelter, camping in the Almighty's shade. I say to the Lord, you are my refuge, my stronghold. You are my God, the one I trust. God will save you from the hunter's trap, from deadly sickness. God will protect you with his pinions. You'll find refuge under his wings. His faithfulness is a protective shield. Don't be afraid of terrors at night, arrows that fly in the daylight, or sickness that prowls in darkness, destruction that ravages at noontime. Even if 1,000 people fall dead next to you, 10,000 right beside you, it won't happen to you. Just look with your eyes, and you will see the wicked punished, because you have made the Lord my refuge, the Most High your place of residence, and no evil will happen to you. No disease will come close to your tent, because he will order his messengers to help you, to protect you wherever you go. They will carry you with their own hands, so you don't bruise your foot on a stone. You'll march on top of lions and vipers. You'll trample young lions and serpents underfoot. God says, because you are devoted to me, I'll rescue you. I'll protect you because you know my name. Whenever you cry out to me, I'll answer. I'll be with you in troubling times. I'll save you and glorify you. I'll fill you full with old age. I'll show you my salvation. The message is clear. If we are engaged with God, God engages with us in a powerful way, in a way that enhances our life. Now, here's an exercise for this week. Sometime when you have a few moments, take a piece of paper and write down all the things